You forgot a lecture. Yeah, come on in. Okay. درست شد
شروع شد.
هم درست شد پس.
نه اینجوریه یا اینجوریه؟ نه fresh and locked.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sejan, turn the lights on, would you?
Yeah. برداشتی نه؟ أعوذ بالله السميع العليم من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله وسلم على سيدنا ونبينا محمد وآله الطيبين الطاهرين اللهم صل على محمد وآله محمد. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accept our efforts in this sacred month, Rajab al-Murajjab. May He make us amongst those who are forgiven, especially on this eve of Friday, Laylatul Istighfar. In this month of forgiveness, we ask Him for complete and thorough forgiveness, inshallah. Tawbatan nasuha, a sincere return, inshallah. We've been reflecting, or we started reflecting on the dua from Imam Zain al-Abidin alayhi salam, dua for the sahar, generally at the time of, it is recommended at the time of Salatul Layl, or specifically after Salatul Layl or after the 11th rak'ah. It is recommended to recite this dua known as dua hazin. And the purpose of this discussion in this month is that one of the most important steps of tazkiyah is returning and seeking forgiveness. Tawbah and istighfar is one of the most important steps on the path of purification and return to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this is one of the most powerful or beautiful supplications that is from the Ma'sumin with regards to istighfar and seeking forgiveness at the best time of istighfar. The best time of istighfar is indeed the time of sahar, right before the break of dawn or before Fajr prayers, the time of sahar. Again, it is mentioned in the Quran, وَبِالْأَسْحَارِ هُمْ يَسْتَغْفِرُونَ وَالْمُسْتَغْفِرِينَ بِالْأَسْحَارِ. Those who seek forgiveness at the time of sahar specifically. This is a very elite group in the people in the journey to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and in the ranks of qurb, those who are close to the Almighty. One of the ranks is وَالْمُسْتَغْفِرِينَ بِالْأَسْحَارِ, for those who get up before the break of dawn. Perhaps some refer to it as the sweetest sleep. That time is the most, especially this time of the year. You know, when it's colder, you want to sleep. As it gets closer to the break of dawn, that is the sweetest sleep. And some people, they would rather get up and communicate with their Lord and pray the tahajjud or salatul layl and do istighfar. This dua is very beautiful as a whispered invocation, as a munajat, asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for forgiveness. Again, I mentioned that the dua begins with salawat, Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad, and then أناجيك يا موجودا في كل مكان. The Imam has the whispering dua, najwa, munajat, whisper. I whisper to you, I can speak to you as one who's very close Ya Mawjudan, or the one who is everywhere. So I don't need to scream or yell, where are you, O Lord? I whisper to you and you can hear me. The next part we mentioned, لَعَلَّكَ تَسْمَعُ نِدَائِي, perhaps that you would hear my call. And we said Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the all-hearing. There's absolutely no doubt that He would hear. However, this tasma is like you would listen to my dua, meaning perhaps it would be worthy of being listened to or responded to by you. Not that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not the one, is not hearing, wal-hayadu billah, or He does not answer the call of those who call. He promises. He says He hears, He's the all-hearing, and He says He answers the call of those who call Him. أُجِيبُ دَعْوَةَ الدَّاعِ إِذَا دَعَانِ. Therefore, I am asking, the Imam is teaching us to ask that our dua is worthy of being heard. In other words, we're in the right direction. Not one who is sinning and at the same time calling. It doesn't work together. One who, for example, steals clothes to pray. What do we say? Salat is batil, yes? Because, it cannot be ghasbi. Even if you pray, that salat is void. Okay? So to call, you have to be in the right direction, communicating with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Then he says, فَقَدْ عَظُمَ جُرْمِي. Why am I asking for my dua to be heard? Because my crime is great. This way of communicating with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, this humble way, is one of the etiquettes of dua. No one should ever have arrogance as we call to the Almighty. That is not the etiquette of abd. Even a parent with their child, if a child comes from a position of power, demanding, it's not very befitting of a child who you raised and loved and gave all that you gave to, and then they they demand something. No, they should be humble. Children towards parents, they should be humble. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَخْفِضْ لَهُمَا جَنَاحَ الذُّلِّ. Humiliate yourself and be very humble in front of them, in front of parents. We should not do that to anyone, humiliating ourselves to anyone other than parents or a divine leader, the Imam, the Prophet, the Imam, or which is humbleness in the court of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. فَقَدْ عَظَمَ جُرْمِي. That is again a sign, even if we have committed sins that are typically considered small, one should look at it as big. Why? Because don't look at the size of the sin. Look at who you are disobeying. How great is the Lord who you are disobeying. Therefore, no matter how small the mistake or sin is, we should look at it as big. And therefore, we consider ourselves as big sinners. That is how we humble ourselves in the court of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He says, فَقَدْ عَظُمَ جُرْمِي وَقَلَّ حَيَائِي. I am shameless. I have very little shame. Meaning what? If we commit a sin, if we disobey Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, even if we don't do the best, what is recommended, that is shameless. In one of the ahadith, we are told neglect of mustahab acts is a state of shame. Something that's recommended. Why do you neglect it? It's mustahab, let's say, it's mustahab to begin your wudu at a certain time, to go to sleep before wudu, to make wudu, before you go to sleep. It's mustahab to start your meal with a pinch of salt or vinegar, if you don't, either or. These mustahabbat, whatever it is, why do you neglect it? If it's simply out of laziness, okay, or not available, okay, it's not wajib, I understand. But it's there and I don't want to do it, or I neglect it. That is shameless. God likes it. He says, mustahab means God loves this. He loves for us to do this. It's not that we're benefiting Him, but He likes it for us. And it doesn't matter. Again, I use the example of parents. A parent who, a child who knows their parents like certain things. A dutiful child, what do? Even if they don't normally do it, in front of their parents they do it to make their parents happy. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is always watching. So one who does not consider the Almighty is shameless. In another dua from Imam Zain al-Abidin as well, dua Abu Hamza al-Thumali. He says, again, he talks on behalf of those who do commit sins, for them to return through this beautiful supplication. So he says, فَلَوَ اطَّلَعَ الْيَوْمَ غَيْرُكَ عَلَى ذَنْبِي مَا فَعَلْتُ. If anyone else would see my sin, I would not do it. But you see it, Ya Allah, you see, we know God sees, yet I'm doing it. Then he clarifies, he says, that's not because you are the least important to see, to witness, but because I know you cover and you're forgiving and you're merciful. From this angle, okay, understandable. If we slip and we know that God is forgiving, God is merciful, and there's temptation, but without an excuse, even a mustahab act should not be neglected. And that would be a shameless situation, let alone committing sins and disobeying Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Then the Imam comes to this part of the dua, Mawlaya ya Mawlaya. Mawlaya has many, Mawla in Arabic has many meanings. It could mean a master, it could mean a slave, it could mean a friend, it could mean a guardian. It has several meanings. When we speak to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, obviously calling Him Mawla is to declare authority, that you're our master, you have authority over us. However, the Imam calls Him Mawlaya, almost like a servant or a slave coming to the master saying, my master. Imam Ali alayhi salam, in a very short dua or statement in Mafatih al-Jinan, Shaykh Abbas al-Qummi narrates it. He says, Ilahi, my Lord, it is enough pride for me that I am your slave. And it is so much honor for me that you are my master. The fact that God is our master, it's such an honor. For some people, their master could be Fir'aun at the time. For some people, their master could be some individual in today's world who has authority, power. I don't know, a president, a king, a billionaire who's their CEO and the boss of their business, whatever, whoever it is. For different people, they choose different masters. A good believer, their master is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They would not want to please anyone while displeasing God. And they would not want to displease God even if it means the entire world would be against them. In other words, they're the one who they consider, a boss at work. I often remind teenagers, when they start working, obviously the boss, whatever the boss says, yes sir. Why? Because the paycheck is in his hand. There is a nice analogy some people put out there, even for husband-wife relationships. In the sense that some would not want to have that. Some woman, for instance, when you tell them that men are in charge of your affairs, they don't want to accept that. But go out to work for a boss out there, yes sir, whatever the boss says. A believer puts Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in that position or higher, in the sense that the way we behave in front of the boss, even in terms of how we use, how we may waste some time, for example, in front of the boss we wouldn't waste time. We want to act busy, even if we're not. For the sincere believer, the real Mawla, the real master, the one who they consider as the owner of their sustenance is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The term Mawla is very powerful if we understand it. So when in the dua we are saying Mawlaya ya Mawlai, it is literally like one who is a slave calling to the master from a very weak position, knowing that everything is in his hands. Mawlaya ya Mawlai. Then the Imam starts describing the difficulties of the time of death. Why? Or the akhirah, the difficulties of akhirah. Why? It's a great reminder. Again, this dua is for return, for purification, for tawbah, for seeking forgiveness. When we remember that all the means will be cut off the minute we depart this world, there's nothing except the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Every other person, in fact, if we understood this in this world, we would live much better, much more comfortable. That the only loyal friend, lover, beloved, deserving of our 100% loyalty is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. In line with loyalty to God, you can be loyal to your spouse, to your children, to your parents, all of this in line with loyalty to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so, obedience and submission to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. When we depart this world, it becomes obvious. All the difficulty, and there is no one who can help us except my master. The master, he says, my master, Mawlaya ya Mawlaya, ayyul ahwali atadhakkar. Which one of those difficult situations and terrifying stations would I remember? And which one of them would I forget? This is an expression. Ayyuha atadhakkar wa ayyuha ansa. It's like, which one should I talk about? Okay? How can I even forget them? Then he says, وَلَوْ لَمْ يَكُنْ إِلَّا الْمَوْتِ لَكَفَى. If the only station was death, would be enough. This is a reminder of the difficulty of death. Quran refers to the time of death as sakarat. I'll finish with this one inshallah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَجَاءَتْ سَكْرَةُ الْمَوْتِ. Sakra is a state of intoxication. It's not that one is intoxicated. In fact, in another ayah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala clarifies regarding qiyamah, another intoxication, in confusion. He says, وَتَرَى النَّاسَ سُكَارَى وَمَا هُمْ بِسُكَارَى. You see people like they're intoxicated. They're under influence, in other words. You see them under influence of something. They're confused. They cannot focus. Completely confused. But they're not really intoxicated. وَمَا هُمْ بِسُكَارَى وَلَكِنَّ عَذَابَ اللَّهِ شَدِيدٌ. Maut itself is sufficient. That confusion of the time of death. وَجَاءَتْ سَكْرَةُ الْمَوْتِ. That is sufficient for us to prepare for. If you don't prepare, if you don't think of akhirah, as in barzakh and qiyamah and the resurrection and all of that. Just think of the truth that we cannot deny. Death and that moment. And oftentimes in all cultures it's very common that they speak of the flashback. Yeah, you know, watching your entire movie of your life and that flashback. Perhaps through the scriptures, through people who went through, you know, near-death experiences and came and spoke of what they went through and what they saw, people are well familiar with the difficulty of that. In some cases, they have witnessed how difficult it is for somebody, how confused they become. The most simple things, like a confused individual, and you know that we see a part of it, the majority of it we don't see. There is the veil that we cannot see. The veil will be removed and he will see it. Imam Hassan, and I'll finish with this one inshallah. Imam Hassan alayhi salam, he was crying. Before he departed this world, he was crying. They said, Ya Ibn Rasulullah, you are the master of youth in paradise. You are guaranteed paradise, no questions. You are the grandson of the Prophet, you are the Imam of your time, you are in the status that you are, and you're crying. He said, well, two things are making me have those tears. One is that I will be departing my loved ones. You know, this is difficult, especially knowing what they will face after me. Knowing that Imam Hussein alayhi salam will no longer have his brother and his backbone, Imam Hassan alayhi salam, with him. So that is painful for me. And then he says, لِهَوْلِ الْمُطَّلَعِ, the terrifying position of when you see the realities. Muttala is from being, you know, exposed to the realities. That I would see everything. That is scary in itself. And therefore, the Imam Hassan alayhi salam, as-Sibt al-Akbar, he was crying. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make us amongst those who prepare for that moment of our death. We ask Him to grant us abundance of His mercy, especially in that moment, and from there on we ask Him to make us amongst those who listen to what's said and follow what's best. Walhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wa sallallahu wa sallam ala Sayyidina wa Nabiyyina Muhammad wa alihi at-tayyibin at-tahirin. Allahumma salli.